Hey Ryan, should we wait for you to come back or? Okay. Yep. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. Before we begin, please stand as you are able to join in a moment of silence in honor of Mrs. Doris May Fitzwater, mother of our mayor, Ron Fitzwater. Mrs. Fitzwater passed away on Saturday, and our prayers are with her family, friends, and all who will miss her. Eternal rest grant unto her, O Lord, and let light perpetual shine upon her. May the souls of all the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Great. Thank you all very much. I'll call this meeting in the Budget Committee to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Allers, Deacon.
Here.
Hensley.
Present.
Lester. Here. Neely. Here. Schwartz.
Here.
Spencer. Here. Spicer. Wiseman.
Here.
Right.
Here. Thank you very much. That takes us to committee discussion of budget. And at the last meeting, there was discussion about, I think, several items related to parks that Parks was planning to come and present on. Should we start there, or were there other introductory matters that staff would like to hit on first?
Well, I think we're ready to start there, but there is one item that Andrew Bruner and I have worked on that relates to the Parks Fund balance. So when I presented on Monday in regards to the Parks Fund balance, the number that I presented was intended to reflect the FY22 audited financial statements, taking into account what the unrestricted fund balance was for parks, and then also taking into account what they had used out of that fund balance in the 23 budget and what they had budgeted in what's before the committee in the 24 budget. That again would have been as of the end of FY22. And so Andrew and I have been working on a more current depiction of what that fund balance is. And so that's what we have on the screen. I haven't uploaded it to your packets, and I apologize. I can do that in the morning, but I'm going to let Andrew walk through what we've talked about here.
Thanks, Sheila. If you see that first highlighted line there, that is a reappropriation of items that are still available at the end of the year. We earmarked those. Last year we had 3 big ticket items. Like there was a playground that we had budgeted for, but due to the supply and demand, we could not get it in time. So that money rolls over, and that's $500,000 right there. And so that's why you see the $1 million that was not initially on hers, that does not get brought into the audited numbers of the committed projects. And so each year we have some bigger projects like that. The link has capital replacement, which is almost $200,000 now. That MOU we have with Lincoln University states that we have to put about $30,000 into that each year. So that's why you see that high of amount rolling over each year. That is not accredited for in those committed projects.
Any questions on that information? Councilman Neely.
What this new number, or not new number, but correct number here, what percentage is that?
So the first boxed space, you can see that the Parks Fund balance at the end of FY23 with all of the things that we are taking into account, including reappropriations, will equate to approximately 15.01%.
Sorry, I had a glare there.
So the other boxes are things that I just felt the need to call out here because they've been discussed by this committee. The first item is if parks were to need to spend an additional $560,000 out of the Parks Fund balance to cover removal of FY24 capital improvement funding, the Parks Fund balance, all other things staying the same, would be just over $1 million or 9.31%. The second box, if all things stayed the same and Parks was required to spend the additional $302,000 to cover administrative chargebacks, it would be just under $1.3 million or 11.31%. And if parks were required to spend money for both of those items, the $560,000 plus the additional 302 for admin chargebacks, the fund balance would be $735,000 or 6.42%. So knowing that those are things that the council's talked about, it's important to provide that information in current context as opposed to context just at the end of FY22. I don't know. Sorry, Andrew, I may have jumped the gun.
Yeah. That was spot on.
And then the second highlighted line that Andrew has there, there's one of those in every fund. That's where the Evergreen study was implemented for personnel costs, and that was a supplemental appropriation that was done in the current fiscal year to cover the park staff. So that's also an item that would not have been included in the FY22 numbers I presented previously.
Any questions? No.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you.
Being that Parks is prepared then to make presentations on the other items that had been previously discussed.
And Mr. Likely, you're welcome to stay there or come up to the table, whichever your preference is.
Getting away, I'll stay right here, it's fine. Since the seas parted, I'll stay right here. Just the first thing I'd like to involve the committee on is chargebacks, administrative fees. Just a few notes there that I know to some degree has been discussed with this body either previously this year or previous years. Just to put a finer point on it, increasing the admin fees from last year, TY 23 to 24, as I think Sheila just mentioned, notes down there below, the balance was $32,000. That's more than double of what's currently paid. And then again, to put a little finer point on it, I looked at it from the standpoint of, let's use round numbers, but $600,000, a little more than that, total, relative to chargebacks. And, the number that I used and to calculate this was, let's say, and we can adjust the number or certainly debate the number, but if Parks and the city staff basically spent roughly 2,000 hours for the year working with Parks on various projects or all the departments combined. Let's say it's 2,000 hours. You divide that out. That's $323 an hour for that. If you look at it from that standpoint. I'll also note that the staff, and I've said this before, city staff, from our standpoint, works really hard and works really well with our department to try to accomplish our dual mission. And that's why I say, just from the sheer number standpoint, putting that finer point on it's important. We certainly welcome the discussion of what's fair, and that discussion of what's fair. We're the only department that would, we write the check now for $300 and some thousand, and if it goes up to $600 some thousand, we're the only department that writes that check. Everything else within as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong, but everything else within the city departments, it's there's not an actual, there's a fee assessed to it, but it's basically shuffled from one account to the other. It's not necessarily a check written. So we're the only ones that write the check, to the best of my knowledge, and we budget for that. And doubling that number is a bigger number, and it does factor, and it does mean something on our end relative to the budget. So, currently we pay 16%. This number, if it goes up, will be virtually double that number. So that's concerning and alarming to me as the commission president and the commission and our budget as it relates to our budget. And I'll kind of roll things up here once I'm finished, but I'm certainly willing to discuss it or answer any questions relative to the chargebacks and our position on them and why we feel the way we do.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and move on, and then we'll come back and probably get questions on numerous topics once you're finished. Unless anyone has a particular question right now.
So Andrew's going to send out handing out some information relative to the CIP and its history. Gives a little bit of overview, which we believe is relative to the conversation tonight. So I just wanted to make sure that we had the facts in our hands to what's out there and what's been voted on and how it's been marketed to our voters. Parks, and I can say this on behalf of every former commissioner of parks, every former president of parks, and every current and former staff. We're extremely thankful and grateful to the citizens for their faith, their support, and their belief in our department. And we certainly hope that we deliver on that. And the CIP is a significant part of what we do in relation to projects. It's not the only bucket we pull from, obviously, clearly, but it's one of the buckets we pull from to help with CIP and capital improvements projects. Anyway, the facts that you've got in front of you are relative to us, and we certainly believe that all the voters, when they went to the ballot box, didn't see a breakdown of percentages of what went to parks, but it was certainly marketed, presented. The city as a whole stood behind that. I believe that sets precedents and is important, and a promise worth being kept, in my opinion. So when you put the CIP and you put the chargebacks, roughly $900,000, that's 8.5% of our budget. That's significant. Those are real dollars that go to a real mission of trying to produce safe, clean, maintained, developed parks, whether present or in the future. I would strongly encourage you to reconsider or to consider not doing it. If you're moving in that direction, I would strongly encourage you not to do it, because it has a real impact on the department that's trying to deliver. And we certainly believe in that mission and we'll continue to carry it out. But $900,000 is a significant impact, and it will have an effect on what we can deliver, both in services and product. I don't think that's disputable. So anyway, that kind of concludes my input, my remarks relative to those two items that were on the agenda. I'm certainly welcome to answer any questions, or my staff that's here.
Okay. Are there other comments from members of your staff, or are they all just reserved for questions?
Just reserved for questions, yes, sir.
Any questions from the committee? Councilman Schwartz.
I'd like to know a little bit about the vote you took last night on the 17%. Why'd you do it? Timing seems weird.
Sure. Frankly, that's a conversation that I've had with our finance staff for the last, the director of finance staff for the last couple of years. It really comes down to making sure that in the event we have a loss, a catastrophic loss relative to dollars, that we're got enough there to not break the bank, frankly. $1 million in our world, when you deal with Washington Park, ice arenas, equipment, golf-related equipment for the golf course, pumps for the pools, pavilions, buildings, structures, fire, as we had in North Jeff City in a pavilion. You know, all that stuff is relative, and most of that stuff has high numbers, high ticket value to it. And to be honest, we felt that the city's 17% certainly makes sense. And the GFOA talks about 2 months worth at a minimum. And just to me, to make sure that we've got enough revenue to operate in the event that we've got to replace something. And what really put a fine point on it was about 3 weeks ago when we were talking with Interim Director Greffrath and I were talking about a study that we had from the Washington Park Skate survey, or the study was done. They identified a leak in the subfloor. Today, if that goes out or we have to replace it, which we're going to eventually at some point, that's $1 million. That was their estimate, not our estimate. That would flush as you see, the fund balance is, roughly around 1.5 million. That would virtually level that out. I think it'd be.
You could make inter-year adjustments to your budget. You could say, well, we got this emergency, we need to back off with Project A. We need to wait for a year for that.
Certainly,
You don't have to tap into your fund balance on situations like that.
well, if they're big ticket items,
I mean, if you got a budget, I don't care if it's a family budget or government budget or whatever, if you have an emergency develop, you're gonna have to make a difficult decision. And that decision always isn't, well, I'm gonna go to my 401k and cash it in. Maybe you just don't go on vacation. So, I mean, I was pleasantly surprised that that move was made. I think it needed to be made.
so do we.
And I think you answered my other question in that you used basically the city's number or rationale to be consistent across the board, which I also appreciate. I hope as we have further discussions on consistency and things between departments of this city, that the same rationale would apply, especially when it comes to administrative chargebacks. I mean, if we're gonna be consistent, we need to be consistent. So I would actually like to hear Sheila at some point, with the permission of the chairman, take what Mr. Lytle said and what's the devil's advocate on that? Is the percentage being allocated the same way across the board?
For administrative chargebacks?
Yes.
No. It is not.
And why?
The administrative chargebacks are calculated following a specific structure, and there are other funds that pay more than the calculated amount because we have some justifiable additional staffing costs. For example, wastewater. Wastewater has bonds that especially the finance staff spend a significant amount of time dealing with when the year end closes. So there is an additional amount that's taken into account there for wastewater that they pay. Parking is kind of the same way. We have one staff person in finance who spends a large portion of time doing invoicing and collections of all parking funds for the parking lots that the city owns. So the rationale with parks has been in place since before I got here 15 years ago. And the structure that's used for parks is that their admin chargeback was to be no more than 5% of sales tax collected for the previous 12 months. If you ask me why, I can't produce a document that specifies why.
Can I ask a question? So the other enterprise funds, you talked about adding amounts for justifiable reasons. Before you add those amounts, are there base chargebacks calculated in a manner similar to parks, or are they all calculated in a separate uniform manner prior to the additional upcharge? That might apply.
The latter. They are calculated in a uniform manner, and then the upcharge is added.
In that uniform manner.
Is the same as all funds except parks.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think I'm done.
Any other questions, Councilman Spencer?
So what would be the uniform manner before the additional, how close would that be to what they're paying currently?
Are you asking me the difference in what they pay versus what is calculated? Or how it's calculated?
How it's calculated?
So we take the last audited fiscal year financial statements, and for every department and fund, we calculate the percent of total operating expenditures. So for wastewater, their total operating expenditures as a percent of all operating expenditures across the city. That percent is then used to come up with the portion they'll pay. We take the expenses from the departments, the administrative departments we spoke of previously, and if the percentage is 10.52% of total operating expenses, they get charged 10.52% of the administrative expenditures. Does that answer the question?
And the way those funds are paid to or transferred to sort of central office from the enterprise funds, they literally moved from, are they moved from one spot on a spreadsheet to another spot on a spreadsheet, or they actually moved from one fund into a different fund?
They are moved on the first day of every fiscal year. They are moved from one fund to the general fund.
I assume that's done electronically at this point, but.
It is. I don't write myself a check, from one city account to the other, but it is.
There's not a physical check written, but there is an actual transfer of.
Correct.
Of real dollars.
And that is done for all of the enterprise funds and for parks as a special revenue fund, and also for the workers' comp fund.
And if those chargeback funds were not transferred, they would stay in each enterprise fund's sort of
Fund balance.
to
Correct.
be used for other operations within each enterprise fund.
Yes.
Any other questions from the committee? Councilman Lester.
So my understanding of the administrative costs, these percentages apply to resolve the city administrator, legal, finance, all the ones.
Correct.
And that's a total amount there.
Yes.
When I've talked with Director Spalding or other from Parks or Director Spalding about this, he says he's doesn't have a problem with changing the chargebacks. It's just that what's the appropriate way to do it, and based on how Parks is structured and operates, it's quite a bit different from the other enterprise funds. I would think the city administrator would have less because the Parks director does a lot of what the city administrator does. I think maybe since Parks has their own website, and the IT is a lot less, I know. But just like he said that wastewater is more, and some of them, appropriately, would be somewhat less, based on taking those into account.
I do not necessarily agree with that statement. I'll use finance and IT as an example. We process all payments for the city, for parks, just like we do every other fund. But I recognize it's all a matter of opinion. We've also had discussions on multiple occasions about the fact that there are different ways that administrative chargebacks can be calculated. And while GFOA recommends doing administrative chargebacks, there is no best practice methodology that they recommend for figuring those numbers. It's left up to individual organizations to determine what that is and how they will do it. So there could be other ways that someone could suggest we do that. They would probably be perfectly fine as well. But this is the methodology that we've used. It has been vetted in certain circumstances. Several years ago, the transit division had a review done, and one of the things that was questioned was the administrative chargebacks. And the federal government hired an outside accounting firm to vet the process we were using, and there were no findings that came back from that. So someone could make the argument there's a different way to do this, and I can't argue with that. There could be many ways to do it, but we've never come up with a different methodology that we feel would be better suited for what we're doing.
Councilman Spencer.
So in a roundabout way, your formula, your methodology has been tried and tested by the federal government within the Division of Transit.
I believe I could make that statement, yes.
Any other comments from the committee or questions? Councilman Lester.
Was that evaluation just for transit or was across the board?
It would have been specifically for transit, but again, because the methodology that's used is the same for the calculations for other enterprise funds. And I have to believe that the federal government, because transit is a recipient of grant funding, the federal government would scrutinize transit more closely. So since they had no issues with it, I feel comfortable in saying that it has been vetted.
Councilman Spencer.
Just a follow-up question to Mr. Leichel. Again, I'll echo some of the comments that Councilman Schwartz said. I think we've had a discussion about why there wasn't that consistency from parks versus with what the city practices with their reserve fund balance. But how come this wasn't pursued or instituted when you developed a budget?
I don't understand the question. What do you mean?
You proposed your budget to the mayor, correct? Why didn't you change your recommendation for your reserve fund balance when you presented your budget? Why did you wait till do it yesterday?
Well, like I said, we've had a rolling conversation about it, and that since we've kind of advanced through the budget process, and like I said, 3 weeks ago we had a conversation about the subfloor at the ice arena and the cost. Again, not our cost, the study's cost, and that was how long ago? 2 years ago.
June 2021.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, things have certainly gone up since then. We just felt that there's a liability need there, and it didn't any one moment that actually hit, but I know that I believe it was Monday's meeting. You all had talked about, the committee had talked about, and the finance department talked about the 17%, and the fact that we aren't quite to 24 yet as far as the budget goes, and that we're still presenting that budget, I just felt that it was time. I felt 17% to echo what the city was doing makes sense. it prudent and appropriate.
So nothing based on the administrative chargeback question or the CIP dollar request? Nothing, that had nothing to do with your decision? Amazing.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilman Schwartz.
When does that go into effect?
Well, we voted last night for it, so it's in effect now for TY '23. But again, it was precipitated, as a finer point of it, is through this whole process of the last 3 weeks or so. And the staff presented, again, through the evolution of the budgetary process and the fact of making a presentation again tonight relative to our budget, we felt that it was important to address a couple of those things, and both for fiscal year '23 and beginning of '24. That those, and you see we're close, and in our world, if something breaks, pumps at the golf course, pumps at the pools, whatever happens through the wintertime relative to machinery, equipment, some big ticket items out there, yeah, you can slide budgets around and move stuff around, but we want to deliver service. We want to deliver a high quality product to our citizens, and we don't want to interrupt those services. And so that's why Commission felt that it was important to ensure that risk, frankly.
Well, and I agree with you. We want to provide service for our citizens. But unfortunately, us as elected folks have to make tough decisions too on what is the #1 priority for the city. And I think we're seeing that during this process. It's been hotly debated. My question is, where are you going to cut your budget next year?
In regards to what specifically?
Well, you're not at your 17%, so obviously you're going to have to cut your budget somewhere.
Or even this year,
I'm sorry?
or even maybe this year as well, since you're below the 17% now.
Close, yeah. I mean, I think that number, much like the city, trying to attain good fiscal sense to make sure that we have our own insurable interest there. And the 17% has value. It's certainly a baseline that we're trying to obtain. And frankly, we know we're at the tail end of a fiscal year and the start of another one, but it puts a point on relativeness in the budget and holds ourselves accountable to be good stewards, the best stewards possible, and that we deliver on our product. And that's why I presented it last night, and the commission agreed wholeheartedly and asked the same question, frankly, as we should have done this a long time ago. And I agree
with that, but my question stands, where are you going to cut in order to get to that number that you passed just 24 hours ago?
Well, I think that's a fair question, in that also, depending upon what this body or the council does relative to the $900,000 that's on the table, we're going to have to readjust budgets based on that. Sure. So the budget is a fluid process. It's changing, morphing as we go in the last 6 weeks. So to answer your question, I don't know that I can directly answer your question because we don't know what the outcome of this body is going to be in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks coming up.
You said it's in effect now.
Well, it is, but I also don't know what's coming. So
Well, I'm saying, are you below it now?
no, this is all projected, and we think we're close. Depending upon some unencumbered projects that we have that are in the hopper. If, as you said, Councilman Schwartz, that if we have to back off of a project or a purchase of a piece of equipment to meet our goals, of course you have to do that as does the city. And we're no different. So to answer your question directly, the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks are going to kind of dictate how and where. So I don't know that I can give you a direct answer as far as what that's going to be tonight.
Does the commission or somebody on staff go through a prioritization process for, I mean, like the city for the pink sheet process goes through a ranking, 1 to 100, or whatever, however many there is. Do you all do that? And if so, is that list available for the committee?
So to answer that question, it's more of an informal basis, and I'll give you the reason why. Since I've been on the commission 4.5 years, this process this year is the most finer pointed, laser focused budgetary process of which we've not experienced before. And I'm okay with that. It's not, that the process doesn't bother me at all. But it's just kind of a moving, sliding goalpost. So we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure out, okay, what are you asking? What do you want? What are we going to be able to, how are we going to be able to adapt and adjust accordingly? So I say that the goalpost is moving, and it is. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just reality. The goalpost is moving. It's moving for everybody. So when that consternation begins, it causes the zigs and the zags of trying to get where we're going. And that's why I say the finer point is this is an evolutionary process that's happening in front of us. And I appreciate the tough questions, the hard questions, and I don't have my tap dancing shoes on, but I'm going to do my best to answer the questions in the most upright and honest, forthright as I can. So you asked about pink sheets. So previously, we had an informal process of knowing, predicting as best we could what things were coming as far as maintenance, equipment, repair, replace, leasing, whatever, structures, whatever. And all of that was presented and executed, okay, to the council, budget, all that. This year's completely different. So my takeaway has been in the last 3 weeks in relation to peak sheets, and we've talked about it just in the last couple of weeks, is we're going to have a list of pink sheets, as you asked, point out, because in my military days, come near the end of the year, there was always federal funds that were made available because you got to use or lose. So I had a laundry list of things that were purchased down the stretch that the funds were made available to us. It's a good thing and a bad thing because you're forced to spend money you really shouldn't spend money on unless they're needed items. Here we have the opportunity to roll things over and to create opportunities with future projects. Personally, I like that a lot better because it makes better use of the funds. But because of where we are and the point that we're trying to put on it, we have a whole list of things. I say a whole list, like I said, it's an informal process, but we could sit down tomorrow and put a pretty long list together, much like the city departments have, of things that each department head would like, want, or need. And we could prioritize them for sure. And frankly, we probably need to do that because of this process has kind of moved us in that direction. And like I said, I'm okay with it. But to give you a long short of that answer is no, we don't have a list. We have an informal list that we've talked about projects and needs futuristically. Normally it's been in a short budgetary consideration process of 6 months or so. We start lining up for next year 6 months before the budget. We start talking like that in March or April. And I think that's consistent with other departments. But I'm certainly of the opinion we need to push that out further. for sure and identify.
Councilman Lester.
I just wanted to point out that, for our budget that we're talking about for the city, our fund balance is estimated, and we had 3 scenarios laid out, from 10.6% to over 18%. So I'm just saying, it's not, we don't know, it's an estimate what our fund balance is gonna be. I understand Parks, their position also. Certainly, and I applaud them for having the higher fund balance. I think 70% is a good minimum, and those Parks, and we would like to have certainly a fund balance more than 70. A lot of our, I've been on the council, our fund balance has been below that. But anyway, it's a good target to have, at least that amount.
Councilman Spaulding.
Just real quick, could you provide us the minutes that you've had prior discussions about the fund balance of increasing to 17%?
Those have been staff conversations. I don't have minutes from
You just, so you really haven't discussed it with your full commission until last night?
I have independent discussions, but not as far as minutes go.
Any other questions from the committee on this item? Any other comments, Mr. Lackel or staff or from the commission? Okay, any final comments from the commission, from the committee relative to the parks budget topic? Okay.
Yes, I mean, first of all, I'm really saddened that we've come this far, automatically giving for so many years, and they accumulated a lot, and they've spent it well, and we've really, really done well. I mean, parks have done well, their staff has done well, they've accomplished their mission. They've actually gone over the top, and they're operated well. But we give them extra in order to do this. But now in the last few years, it seems like the extra really isn't needed as badly as it did 10 years ago. I would dearly wish that we could get together still with the parks, with our budget, and to see where there's some give and some take. My goodness, we're not two separate cities. I mean, this is everybody's money. We're desperate for trucks to plow our roads. And if we have a big ticket item fail, ice arena, the city's gonna help. A major problem at the park, golf course pumps, the city's gonna come back and help. I mean, you guys aren't gonna be stranded. We don't have a fail safe. You guys do. We're the big brother that can help sometimes. And then one thing, I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm gonna scratch it out. I've got a thing here that says shut mouths don't catch flies, but I'm gonna scratch it. With Adrian's Island, we were told, those that I followed it from the day one, from Mr. Wilhover saying, what are you doing? And that was years ago. And we were told in print, in person, at meetings, only money is going to be spent was to have the bridge go across and then make a path around for fishing, look at the river and some benches. They got a stipend, or I don't know how much Ms. Cooper gave. And all of a sudden it took off. We're spending gobs of money on the parks, and that's fine. But things change. That's one of the things that change. Right now, we don't have enough money to execute our mission. We've got dump trucks that the frames are cracked at the pivot points where the pickup is or the front end is. If we can't push the snow, we're truly going to be like Columbia. Really nice parks, but horrible roads and can't take care of the snow. But once again, I just wish we could just, and next year for sure, let's just see what we really, really need and how we can all work together. This is not parks money. It's not our money. It's the other 40,000 people in Jefferson City that put in. And well, the other thing is that we'd start getting an internet tax, maybe we'd have a little more money to put in, but that's all I got to say. I'm just sad we can't work together.
Councilman Mealy.
Yeah, thank you. This may not be directly related to parks, but just to kind of follow up on Councilman Deacon and Mr. Marash, this question is for you. The conversation has led to dump trucks, and I thought it was gonna be infrastructure, but it sounds now more like it's, public works things that can't find funding. So my question is, did we as a city in '22 apply for any grant funding through the VW fund for dump trucks?
I believe we did apply for some grants through the VW fund, but it was, I don't know why, I can't remember what vehicle it was, but we did try, I believe.
Okay. Could I get that application from you?
Sure.
I guess to follow up and just close on that thought, I don't think there needs to be a whole lot of fighting over funds. I think we ought to go out and seek funds. I mean, the federal government is throwing money everywhere, and there's a lot available. So I think when we get in gear and to that degree and seek these funds that are out there available to communities that other communities are getting and we're not, then we don't have to have these conversations about taking or redistributing monies from one entity to another in the city. So
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Okay, well, before we move off the parks topic, my sense is that there are some people here who would like to give public comment, and I'm going to put the over under on what percentage of them are here to talk about parks at about 99.5%. So if you are here interested in providing public comment on the parks topic, we're going to limit each comment to 3 minutes, and if possible, please avoid just repeating comments that have previously been made to the extent that you can. Okay. This seat here is available. If you like to sit, you can also come up to the bar and stand if you'd like. Mayor Landwehr,
So I really have to limit it to 3 minutes.
please.
Wow. I might beg some indulgence on that. I don't speak to you very often. In light of the slide that was presented recently, I don't know how in God's name this body would move any department down to a fund balance of 6.42%. But that's what I thought we had cooking with the administrative surcharge and the invasion of the capital improvement sales tax. And so my remarks are directed to those two issues because I suspect that in spite of that slide, that there are folks, based on public comments, that those two issues are still in play. On the administrative surcharge, you do not have a policy. The definition of a policy is a high-level overall plan embracing general goals and acceptable procedures. They're uniformly applied. Your finance director said this thing you call the surcharge plan is not uniformly applied. Calling it a policy gives it undeserved credibility. Right now, for 15 years, Parks has been devoting 5%. Not a lot of science behind that. Now the proposal is apparently to go to 10%. That's not a policy. That's governing by impulse. Waking up this morning and saying 10% seems better than 5%. No rationale for it. We just need the money. Let's just change the number. The counties, not that we want to imitate Cole County, God forbid, but the county administrative surcharge for their funds is 3%. I don't have any philosophical objection to an administrative surcharge, makes perfect sense, but let's have some rationale. Let's have a policy. Let's discuss it. Let's have a written document that's approved by this body that says, this is how we're going to do administrative surcharges in this city. It's not uniformly applied. You have $3.5 million from the new law enforcement fund.
Public safety tax. It's public safety.
Public safety tax, thank you, Councilman. I've been told that that's immune. I've been told the administrative surcharge will not apply to that. Very interesting. That doesn't sound like uniform application to me. What's the rationale for that? So I would invite you to think long and hard, arbitrarily moving an administrative surcharge system of 5%, for which I don't know of a lot of study that supports that. Maybe there is, but there is no support to move it to 10%. That's just government by impulse. On the capital improvement sales tax, I was just at a little get-together at Tharp Garden because there was a voter-approved measure that funded a STEM school in this community, and it's a wonderful project. Now, can you imagine if the school board, and I've heard some councilmen say, well, I didn't promise anything. All those promises back in 2022, somebody else made those promises. Now, can you imagine if the school board next year, the new school board said, I didn't make that promise. We don't need a STEM school. We don't need the early childhood center that was promised in that bond issue. I didn't make that promise. Can you imagine how the school board would fare at the next bond issue? The citizens would laugh them out of the ballot box. If you proceed to, back in 2022, the voters were told 10% of the capital improvement sales tax bond would be to the parks. Now, going back historically, I'm old enough to where I remember. Okay? When the parks tax was implemented, before that, in 2005, parks had 20%. And they had done that for 20 years, for 4 sales tax cycles. And when the parks sales tax was proposed, and by the way, unlike the public safety sales tax, which is new money, when the park sales tax was implemented and approved in 2005, parks gave up their funding from the property tax. 16 cents, or I think 18 cents or 16 cents from the levy went away. That was the trade-off. The voters were told that the parks, because we did the analysis, if you completely took capital improvement sales tax revenues from parks, they might as well not even have the vote because they'd end up in the hole. So the compromise was 20% goes to 10%. Now, back in 2022, the voters were told, and they approved overwhelmingly, that this is what the capital improvement sales tax money will be used for. Now, I'm about out of time, but I don't understand some of the numbers that I've read in the newspaper. Capital improvement sales tax G will raise $30 million for the city of Jefferson over 5 years. You take 10% for parks, the city has $27 million over 5 years. In addition, they have $5.5 million from the county. I'll tell you a story how that occurred someday. So the city, in this 5-year plan, has $32.5 million to spend on capital improvements. And you're going to parks and saying they don't get the 10% that you promised the voters? I don't understand the math. Finally, this is a city document. We took a snapshot. What does sales tax G, what does that fund look like right now? I'll leave you copies of it. The finance director can provide it. You go through the numbers, bottom line, I know I'm short on time, but I'm going to leave you with this number. Sales tax G, when you roll through the cycles, roll through the fiscal years, there's a bottom line number. Right now, there's a little item called current remaining budget, not expended or encumbered as of 9/11/23. Are you with me? Sales tax G, money in your bank account right now for your capital improvement projects. Total, $4.7 million. You peel off parks, the city has right now in its capital improvement bank account $4.6 million. The current remaining budget not expended for parks, $122,000. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you need to watch your numbers. I think you need to drill into it. I think you need to make reasoned decisions based on good fiscal analysis. I think your finance department does a great job. I almost didn't speak tonight because I think that last slide kind of says it all. If you do what I've heard that you're thinking about doing, running that surcharge from 5% to 10%, and eliminating, reducing that 10% capital improvement share by parks, you will drive the parks fund balance to 6.42%. I would just encourage you to be very, very careful about those numbers. Public trust is hard to build. You're in sales tax G. Taxes are hard to approve in this community. We've had overwhelming success. I've worked on the campaigns, some of you have too. We're always able to go to the voters. Every campaign, we've said, here's what we promised, and here's what you got. Here's what you promised, here's what we promised you, and here's what you got. If you deprive parks of what you told the voters in 2022, you need to be on that committee because you need to explain to the voters why what you promised them they didn't get. That trust is hard to maintain. And I think that the general fund has always been a struggle. 15 years ago, the general fund has always been a struggle. Every budget year, we've always gone back and said, we need to somehow supplement that general fund. It's a challenge. I don't say it's easy, but you got to be very, very careful about what you promise voters and what you deliver. So thank you for your time. I ran over a little bit. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there questions for Mayor Lander? Councilman Schwartz.
Mayor Lander, who was mayor when there was a cut from 20% to 10%?
Councilman, I think the park sales tax was 2005, and I think I was mayor. I was mayor 2003, 2000.
Saw a 10% reduction in the parks capital improvements fund.
It was a
Yes or no?
yes.
But I was under your watch.
That's correct.
Did you do administrative chargebacks when you were mayor?
I think they were in existence at the 5% range.
Did you set a policy?
No.
So why do you come here and lecture us about doing that when you didn't do it? Because the problem with being a politician is you have a record.
Well, you know, because we learned throughout the years. I have a lot of things I would have rather done.
Well, me too.
Okay, so I share that with you. And to be honest, Councilman, I think you're right. If I understood how unwieldy this and how misused and mismanaged this idea of administrative chargebacks would be, I would have looked at it very carefully and tried to develop a firm policy. Now,
Council.
and it wasn't. May I finish? May I finish?
How long were you?
No. May I finish? Okay. So at the time,
You've already had 20 more minutes than the time allotted.
Councilman Schwartz, until it's finished.
I'll be glad to answer another question if you want. If you want. Monday morning quarterback, I wish we would have established a policy, but it was trucking along pretty good. I think everybody's kind of okay with 5%, even though there isn't a lot of rationale for it. But what's brought it to a head now is this idea that somehow we're just going to flip the switch and make it 10%. So that's caused this idea to receive more scrutiny.
Why do you think government's budget every year?
To be good stewards of taxpayer dollars.
Would you agree that priorities change?
Yes.
So how can you, as a former elected official, you come in here and you want to lecture me about, because I'm the one that said I wasn't here when that decision was made, and I wasn't. I'm not that guy. I'm a different individual. My priorities are different. Just like if the legislature would change over parties. Do you think that something that somebody said in 2021 is still going to be the rule?
Not everything.
Change it.
Not everything, but when you go to the voters, Councilman, and you tell them, vote for this capital improvement sales tax for can I finish? When you go to the voters and you say, vote for this capital improvement sales tax, and here is what we're going to do. Now, we're not talking about forever. We're talking about 5 years. And here's the projects that we're going to do. I don't think after 2 years, you ought to change those priorities, unless there's an absolute emergency, because you've got $32.5 million in the rest of the city budget. If you've got concerns and priorities and shortfalls, before you just look at this little part of the capital improvement sales tax budget named parks and latching onto it, maybe you have to. Maybe in an emergency you have to. But you've got $32.5 million that I don't see you taking a real careful look at.
Nothing humors me more than when somebody comes in and tries to lecture me on the decision I'm making based on the priorities I promised my constituents.
It's called democracy, sir. A citizen, I'm a citizen, I should be able to come up here and share my opinions with you anytime, as any resident should, and I shouldn't be berated for it.
And I have a right to disagree with you.
You absolutely do, and I respect you for it.
I respect you too, John. I just put that on the record one last time.
We're good.
The man standing here was the one that cut the Parks Capital Improvements Fund by 10%.
Can I give you the context?
I didn't ask a question.
We're getting a new revenue source.
That's great. I don't think you have the floor.
Councilman Spencer.
I just was wanting to ask about the 5%, because you were mayor when that was instituted.
Well, it wasn't instituted, it was in place when I became mayor.
But you agreed to the 5% chargebacks, correct?
Yeah.
And the council didn't vote on that. You arbitrarily made that.
No, it was in the budget, and every budget year had it, and we went along, and everything was fine. And I think everything would be fine now if you stayed with 5%. The problem is you're doubling it for one department.
Well, what we're doing is making it consistent across the board with what the enterprise fund is being charged. Just like Mr. Leichel has testimony tonight about being consistent with the methodology of the reserve fund balance of the 17%.
I think your director said it all. When she was asked whether or not it's applied consistently, she said it's not.
I'd like to give her a chance to respond to that, because that's not my understanding of her comments.
It is calculated, and Parks pays a lesser percentage than is calculated. And there are some funds that pay a greater percentage than are calculated.
And so, to clarify, because I've made this comment several times, under Mayor Tom Rackers, the half-cent parks tax was presented to him. My former organization, the International Association of Firefighters, worked out a deal that parks was not supposed to be part of capital improvement sales tax. And that's how the deal was presented. That's how our agreement was, that we would go out, support it, knock on doors, and tell those voters, please support this, because it's going to relieve fund from general fund, which they were no longer part of, and that they would be not a part of capital improvement sales tax, because that would free up money for other departments. Somehow that got changed when you became mayor.
I'm unaware of that discussion. You show me some record anywhere, so that's documented. Doesn't exist.
Kind of convenient. So.
Show me. I'm from Missouri.
Well, history matters, and absolutely, promises matter, words matter, and
What the voters were promised is documented. What you've indicated, I've seen no documentation whatsoever. I have no actual knowledge of those discussions ever occurred.
Councilman Lester.
My understanding is that currently fees are 40% of the operating budget of parks. And I'm just wondering, you know what? I expect it's much, much less back when this was approved, this 5%. And I don't know, it seems like that would have a bearing on this. Because back then the 5% was mostly related to the revenue and operating, maybe also on the sales tax. I guess I'm just trying to say that I think it's great that Parks has been good stewards and appropriately structured fees for activities and things. It's almost, to me, like so they have a much bigger operating budget, partly because of that 40% fees. It's almost like changing the way you do the chargebacks is kind of against their good stewardship, and they're raising their operating budget outside of sales tax. Anyway, that's
Make a good point. Fee structure is a hard balance. On one hand, you want to provide a lot of free services to the public. On the other hand, you want to, you know, if you rent the ice arena, probably likely the rental fee. That's a great point. It's a delicate balance.
Any final questions for the speaker, Councilman Neely?
Maybe not a question, but I just certainly appreciate the institutional knowledge and understanding of what's happened over time. And you don't have to smirk, Councilman Spencer. You've been doing that during his whole presentation. I just think it's
Keep the questions to the speaker and then allow him to take a seat and make the voice over to the chair.
But I just appreciate you coming tonight and sharing that historical knowledge. You know, one of the things is I think we all get this, that when you run a ballot and you run an election, the ballot language doesn't have every nuance of what a governmental entity is going to do with the money. We would have 20-page ballots. And that's why the city and the folks who worked on this went and presented the information to the voters. I mean, folks from the city come up with a website and put parks on here. And this is what voters are looking at. And then, like somebody said tonight, Public Works with 59% of this tax. And then that's who's, I guess, proposing that we take parks to who has the majority of this tax, you know? But I just want to make sure that the public understands. I mean, I think they know that this is presented to the voters. It's not on the ballot, but your voter does your research ahead of time, and they go and vote accordingly. So the argument of it wasn't on the ballot is I don't quite understand that argument.
Every piece of literature that in any campaign is vetted and approved by the public governmental body that is proposing it, whether you're the county commission or the school board or the city of Jefferson. Every allocation, every advertisement, every representation was approved by this body.
And I understand if my colleagues don't want to do things that former councils did, people are mad at people or whatever, which I think, you know, slows us all down with all the fighting. But, you know, it's the city that makes the promise. It's not, so, you know, if you're upset with former council, I get that. I understand that. But to that point, it's the city that's promising to the voters what they're going to do. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, and I appreciate your time and effort. I really do. I respect you all. It's hard work, and I appreciate the time you spend on it. Take care. Thank you.
We have a lot of people left to get to. We are going to get to everybody. Everybody's only have 3 minutes. but we are gonna stick to Ms. Allen.
Julie Allen, thank you all, I appreciate it. Of course, I fully support Parks and Recreation and everything we do really in the city. We do around Parks and Recreation with our family, whether it's the chalk art in Memorial Park this past weekend, whether it's Porch Fest, whether it's going to the amphitheater. This is our entertainment mostly. And I think that's true for many of us, and many of us outside of the area. So frankly, we expect more from our Parks and Recreation. It's what makes our city grow and thrive. Of course, there are other important things. And you know, I'm just a regular person up here without any real expertise. I've come to the meetings as I've been able to. So I have a few suggestions. One, I have done a lot of work on indirect costs, administrative charges, because I have a CPA license. So look at it. I think you do have a problem here. You're talking about exorbitant fees, and there's something wrong. I mean, we're all here fiscal stewards, and many of us say we're fiscally conservative, but we're wanting to charge these exorbitant fees. Something's wrong. I really would suggest you look at that very closely. Two, the mayor, presented his budget. I was there. I support the mayor's budget, but there was no sky is falling. And all of a sudden, I go on vacation for about 2 weeks, and the sky is falling off. I see the newspaper, sky's falling, we can't afford this, we can't afford that. I haven't heard that from the mayor. I trust the mayor. And I just did not get that from his budget presentation. Yes, things are tight, but look, I do respect our former city officials, even if I don't agree with you. And I respect what Mayor Landwehr said. So I would recommend you look at your own backyard. You've got plenty of money there, friends. Look at it. A couple little suggestions here. Although I understand the benefit of a PR position, is it essential? Probably not for a city our size. That's a little money. You did a contract, $150,000 to find more efficiencies. I hope you at least find $150,000 in savings, plus the cost of the staff, maybe $300,000. If you don't, it was probably a waste of money. But you should look to that to find ways to save money. Again, look at your fund balances. Look at where you're at. And I will be honest, right now I'm skeptical of my vote next time for a capital improvement sales tax. I've had that. You had a public safety sales tax. Where is the money going in Jefferson City? I am very disappointed in it. So thanks.
Next speaker.
My name is John Beakley. I live at 116 Forest Hill. I'm in Councilman Spencer's district. I live 2 blocks from on Forest Hill. I live 2 blocks from Memorial Park. I have a disabled wife. She had a massive stroke after an incredible career in state government. We depend on that park. We depend on that park for it to be meticulously maintained, which these guys have done 15 years ago. They put in huge sidewalks that can now accommodate my wife, who's in sort of an exotic wheelchair. I biked for years in part on the city trails. I was once a wellness ambassador for a part of state government and dealt all the time with city parks staff over at the link. They were superb. The quality of my interactions with them was wonderful. I don't have a relative that works for the city. I don't have a relative that works at parks, nor am I a contractor or a participant in any kind of contract with the Parks Department. I'm just a citizen. I've never spoken in front of the council before. I come from a big city, and one that's definitely not as well run as the one I've lived in for the last 30 years. Jefferson City is an extremely conservative community, and I will remind y'all of that tonight. I think conservative is about being very cautious about change. The idea that you're just bandying about taking that surcharge from 5 to 10%, that you're gonna take $900,000 out of their budget, 8%, over 8%. You're right, Congressman, or Councilman Deacon, you do have to buy dump trucks. This city is spectacular when it comes to snow removal. It just embarrasses Columbia year after year after year. Y'all do a fantastic job. But the truth is, you've got a Parks Department that's overseen by a board. There's a certain amount of independence that comes with that. And I realize the awkwardness where here you all are as councilmen who are supposedly responsible for the city's budget. That's complicated. And I realize they spend money probably somewhat differently than y'all would if you got direct access to their budget. But I would remind you, they do a great job. They really do. They've got great staff. One last thing. In the next 3 years, they're going to do real significant maintenance, both at Memorial Park on the pavilion, I think at Riverside too, and then at the ice arena. The maintenance on those 3 things will run, let's say, $1 million. You can't fund that kind of thing on a regular basis. You know, that pavilion's been there for decades. You clip them to the tune of 9% or 8%. You put them in a position of deferring maintenance on things. You defer maintenance on things. It's more expensive down the road. And in the meantime, us citizens are dealing with rattier facilities. So my point is, I love this city, and y'all do a great job. But the truth is, so does Parks. I would ask you to be conservative, to be cautious about what you're considering changing, because that is a problem that doesn't need fixing. To be careful. And you're right, you're charged with managing the city's budget and making hard decisions about whether you get new dump trucks or not, that we all count on y'all to have to move snow melt around. So be cautious.
Is there any
Thank
questions? Any questions, Speaker? I'm sure we all join you also in Jefferson City's superiority to Columbia.
Well, it's shocking. It's their snow removal relative to our cities. It's shocking. It really is. I used to manage people here, and there was just the discount they all got trying to get into the office relative to here.
Thank you very much. Next person is providing public comment. Last call. All right, thank you all very much for being here. My understanding is there's not intended to be a vote on these items this evening. Is that correct? Okay. Other topics of conversation tonight by members of the committee on other elements of the vote.
So we'll pass these out.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if Mayor Fitzwater realizes, there we go. I'm not sure if he wants, there we go.
And I'll just remind the room of our scheduled stop at 7 p.m. this evening. And while this is getting handed around, I'll say our next meeting, we are going to have a budget committee meeting beginning at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 18th. 5 p.m. to about 5:45 p.m. that will occur immediately prior to the regularly scheduled city council meeting. That pre-meeting usually starts at 5:45, the council meeting usually starts at 6. We will stay on that schedule. but there will be a roughly 45-minute additional budget committee meeting beginning at 5 p.m. And then following that, our next scheduled meeting is a week from tonight, the 21st at 5:30 p.m. Councilman Lester.
So what you have is a spreadsheet that Ms. Barry helped develop. I was trying to understand and get a better grasp of the sales tax H budget. And so it's spread out to show the different departments and the different percentage from the sales tax H. You can see on the very right-hand side, it's called base amounts, 5.6 million, and then in the budget, 6.0, almost 9 million. And then I was looking at what are those different base amounts, they're amounted to, related to the percentages that voters voted on. And then we listed what currently budgeted. And so I was curious as to, okay, how much, is currently in the budget related to the base amount, and then what we're anticipating to be actual revenue. And basically, so that at the bottom, police, fire, parks, etc., and the base amount is 5.6 million, and the amounts there currently having the budget over the amount, and then related to base amount 2, which is what the anticipated revenue is, how much would be available if we, in the budget. And I guess I was looking at this in terms of what's been talked about as far as there being some kind of crisis or really need to take money from elsewhere to supplement some other aspects of the budget. And I don't know, it does, I think I've got a better idea of where we're at and what, as far as the budget. And, I would say, like with Public Works, yes, we need those trucks, definitely. But whether we need to take any money from parks or anywhere else, I think Public Works certainly has funds within this budget. And I also, my understanding is we have, what, $1 million or over $1 million carryover from the current year in sales tax. I'm just saying, I think, it's, I just don't see that we need to try to take money from parks to supplement some other areas of the budget. And I also think we're better off leaving a lot of this money instead of trying to identify things in the peak sheets that we fund now. We're better off maybe going through our regular process of the committees. And I'd certainly like to have more of a take from our new administrator on our budget. And come back to it, maybe. We don't have to, right now, determine all this. And I think we're better off taking a little more time with it. So that's, anyway, I'm open to try and answer questions about what I've shown you here.
Any questions from Councilman Lester? Councilman Spencer.
Not necessarily a question, but just some concern with us of a wait and see approach. Trucks break down, snow plows, trucks break down. There is an immediate need.
No, I agree with
we have to address, especially with it takes 2 years to get those trucks delivered to us, even if we place the order tomorrow.
Well, I agree, and I voted this morning. We need those trucks. At the same time, I think that we have money in the budget to pay for them. I think we have it now.
But you voted to endorse the proposal of removing the 10% out of the capital improvement. That was what you voted on. So did you change your mind now?
That's not what we voted on this morning.
It was.
Any other questions for Councilman Lester? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any other comments, questions, et cetera, from the committee on other elements of the budget? Seeing none, we'll see everybody Monday night at 5 p.m. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're adjourned.